Meet Fate, a scrawny, good-for-nothing weakling. His life was a miserable existence until he made a deal with the devil and inherited one of the 7 deadly sins, gluttony. With his newfound power, he devoured everything in his existence in hopes of becoming a prince of hell one day. Several years ago, life was miserable for the poor, and the mighty ruled over the weak mercilessly. In those desperate times, a hideous-looking vagrant named Fate Graphite was going through his awful life. Fate had a job as a castle guard. One fateful day, as he was protecting the gate, he felt his rumbling stomach. He laments his ability, gluttony, which is the cause behind his suffering despite consuming a meal. It was time for him to clock out of work, however. A trio of holy knights from a famous Vlaric family headed towards the castle, and the pompous Raphael flung a few coins on the ground to taunt him. When Fate tried to bend down to lift them up, Hado stomped on his hand and started walloping his poor behind. The boy's stomach kept on rumbling the whole time, which caused the knight to go berserk and lash out his anger at him. When all seemed hopeless, another holy knight named Roxy came through to rescue Fate from his perpetual suffering. Roxy helped him patch up his injuries and informs Fate to tell her if anything like this happened again. Fate tells her that this was normal and departs. He goes to a cafe to munch like a madman in hopes of appeasing his gluttony. As he walks home, he is disappointed by his persistent hunger, even after a wholesome meal, blaming his useless gluttony skill. He wishes for a more applicable ability, but has no choice but to accept his fate as a lonely nobody. Feeling lost as a loser. Fate notices a couple of robbers attacking someone. He instantly thinks of Roxy, the gorgeous holy knight who had saved him. After informing her, Fate took over her guard duty while she confronted the robbers. While waiting, Fate witnessed the confrontation, and when a fleeing thief headed his way, his initial cowardice was overpowered by a brave sense of duty. He fought, and amazingly defeats the injured thief. Out of nowhere, a mysterious voice alters Fate of the activation of his gluttony skill, boosting his stats and bestowing him brand new abilities, including telepathy and identify. Enlightened by this news, Fate goes to rejoin Roxy. She offers him a job as gratitude for his actions. Roxy insists Fate join her family, despite his initial reluctance. Thinking about his future, Fate contemplates 2 paths. One of indefinite suffering, the other working for the gorgeous Roxy. Fearing the cycle of abuse might continue, Fate agrees to Roxy's persuasion. That night, Fate, now with triple-digit stats, contemplates the mysterious alteration in his body. Confident in his newfound abilities, he considers the possibility of facing wild beasts. The following day, Fate, impoverished and in search of a weapon, comes across an arrogant merchant. Unable to afford any decent weapons, Fate uses his Identify skill to inspect the barrel weapons. Despite 0 durability and strength in most, a dirty sword, much like himself, catches his eye. He is amazed when the sword, named Greed, talks to him, offering a deal. Greed, understanding Fate's gluttony, convinces him to purchase the sword with his last 2 coins. Fate joyously accepts, now accompanied by a talking sword. Elsewhere, the Vlarics discuss Roxy's attempt to enlist Fate without their approval. Memel suggests teaching Roxy a harsh lesson, but Raphael, considering Fate is useless, dismisses the idea. Raphael heads to the military district, shocking Memel with his plan to study immortality. Later, Fate, with his sword Greed, senses an incoming threat and encounters a nasty goblin. His upgraded stats from battling activate his gluttony skill, further enhancing his strength. Fate faces hundreds of goblins, showcasing newfound prowess. Greed reveals Fate's unique gluttony skill, stealing stats at the cost of experience. Greed warns Fate to keep the gluttony skill secret, so Fate decides to fight solo. But Greed promises him that he's never alone. After vanquishing the goblins, Fate collects rewards and plans a feast, but Greed emphasizes humility. Encountering a man harassing a little girl, Sahara, Fate uses Identify, realizing the man conceals his stats. Despite the odds, Fate decides to save the girl from peril. Elsewhere, a church lady is worried about a missing child. Fate continued his pursuit of Sahara with her kidnapper and capitalizes on the opportunity to save her. The villain makes fun of Fate's useless attempt, exaggerating his own power. Greed suggests a strategy to exploit the villain's arrogance, prompting him to a wild goose chase. The man threatens to unalive Fate in front of Sahara, showcasing his handy ability. Following Greed's advice, Fate strikes the man down and learns. Hado planned the abduction of Sahara. Fate rescues Sahara and invites her to a meal, revealing Sahara has never eaten meat. How unfortunate. After taking Sahara back to the orphanage, Fate receives a buttload of gratitude for the first time in his life. He gives Sahara some words of advice, after recalling his father's words about finding happiness through laughter. Fate discovers a new skill, sharp edge, and ponders on the idea of growing stronger without relying on chance. Greed informs him of his first day at the Hearts, causing Fate stress as he remembers that he forgot to buy new attire for the occasion. At the cafe, it is announced that Roxy's father, Sir Mason, has passed away, and they discuss the potential succession. Concerns arise about the Holy Knight's control without Mr. Mason. The following day, at the Knights District, Fate heads to his new work home. He is dazzled by the Hart family estate and is welcomed by Roxy. She introduces Fate to her deceased father, who was eliminated by a mystical dragon in Galia. Roxy, despite losing her dear old dad, wants to make their house joyful and work together. They try shaking hands, but Fate diverts her attention by pointing at a random person to avoid activating his telepathy. After working hard for a week, Fate neglects his promise to conduct himself appropriately and continues chatting to his sword, Greed. Roxy starts calling Fate family, but he seeks something more. Out of nowhere, Fate experiences an intense, ravenous hunger, fearing he might lose control. Roxy snaps him out of it, revealing their shared experiences of losing fathers in monster hunts. Afterward, Fate wakes up with a note from Roxy informing him to take a break. Greed reveals that the Gluttony skill, once activated, lusts for more souls, making Fate seek out and devour them. If he refuses, he'll starve or lose control and attack anyone. Fate then learns to recognize his hunger limit through his eyes turning red, signaling a temporary power boost. Out in the open, Fate smells people as prey and understands his hunger boost has already activated. He continues to massacre goblins with newfound strength and later heads to the Hobgoblin Forest. Greed advises him to feed souls to Gluttony occasionally. Alarmed by the appearance of a Goblin King with health regeneration, Fate seeks its power and charges at it, petrified as it consumes a human. He confronts the Goblin King but freezes upon seeing the human body. The fight continues, with Greed angered that Fate is only dodging. After landing the final blow, Fate's stats augments and health regeneration is added. Greed offers a new weapon form, which is a magic bow, but requires all of Fate's stats gained since they met. Fate is dubious, but concurs, unlocking the bow's power. Fate examines the bow on goblins, leaving valuable goblin ears on the church doorsteps. The following day, Roxy, dressed as a casual civilian, undergoes a secret inspection in town and calls Fate to accompany her. Inside the town, Fate kept on calling her, "My lady," prompting Greed and Roxy to rebuke him. Roxy insists he call her Lexi, and Greed forms sarcastic jokes to lighten up the mood. In the energetic town, a holy knight in the market causes trouble. Suddenly, Fate's stomach growls, aggravating the knight who seeks to punish him. Greed advises them to pose as a lovely couple, and the awkward act allows them to escape. Fate then starts hearing Roxy's thoughts due to his telepathy and freaks out when he learns her heart is racing. They head on over to a gem merchant, and Roxy feigns interest in an oversized gem. Fate uses Identify to check for gems in some ores, but Roxy ignores them. She seeks information on a mysterious monster and recent goblin killings. Fate, realizing he is that monster, takes her to the cafe. The bartender reveals a warrior profiting from goblin corpses, fueling Roxy's investigation. Fate's old pal arrives at the cafe, suggesting a Lich might be held accountable. Concerned about Holy Knight's involvement, Fate fears his Gluttony skill will be exposed. A couple of traveling warriors demand drinks and harass Roxy, but she deals with them swiftly. The warriors then discover Roxy's identity, apologizing and offering money. Roxy denies the compensation, expressing her desire for a world where holy knights and peasants can live together. Fate decides to pursue her goal. After treating themselves to a meal, they protect a lost child being abused by the Vleriks. They return the boy to his mother, and Roxy's joy resembles that of Fate. Greed suggests a magic item to hide their activities from Roxy during goblin hunts, and they purchase a magical mask. Fate gives Roxy an oar as a gift, and Roxy appreciates it. Meanwhile, Raphael gathers knights for an excursion to Galia. Afterwards, adventurers run across the masqueraded Fate, now known as Corpse. The monsters within the vicinity are vanquished, leaving the adventurers rattled. Corpse plans to upgrade his stats before holy knights chase after him the following day, feeling the stress of his double life. Roxy informs Fate of a secret mission that ends up being good old grape harvesting. While walking through her family's land, Roxy introduces Fate as a hired help to her mother, Aisha. Aisha then asks Fate if he has the hots for her daughter. Fate surprisingly blurts out his deep care for Roxy, making her blush on the spot. Fate consumes the delicious grape juice and inquires about Sir Mason's assistance in the land cultivation. They talk about the frequent monster threat during harvest, and Fate's stomach rumbles, signaling danger. Roxy runs into a mysterious girl named Maine, who reveals her Galian origins. Confronting Fate, Maine brings up the topic of kobold monsters behind the mountains and lets Fate prey on them. Greed is bamboozled, and Fate senses the eerie nature behind the encounter. Roxy provides a historical overview of Galia's downfall and signifies her amazement at encountering a full-blooded Galian survivor. Fate and Roxy then decide to go back after grape harvesting. The following day, monsters wreak havoc in the vineyard. An unusual and vicious monster, Crowned Beast, shows up, sparking concern. Fate realizes he's nearing starvation and must conceal it from Roxy. The Crowned Beast, a level 50 monster, poses a grave threat. Roxy calms the villagers, promising to vanquish the foul beast. Greed warns Fate that they are no match for it, but Fate resolves to fight. Later that night, Fate confronts the monsters. His gluttony skill initiates, and he transforms Greed into a Robin Hood bow, decimating several monsters. Fate then faces the Crowned Beast, but it uses an unexpected move, Ruinous Strike. Fate survives, activates his first-level hidden art, and abolishes the Crowned Beast. Even so, he experiences unbearable agony due to devouring a high-quality soul for the first time. On the way home, Fate ponders over his worthlessness and the uncontrollable hunger growing within him. He faces the conundrum of concealing his monstrous secret while considering to support Roxy. His red eye signals a growing hunger that goblins can no longer satisfy. Fate decides he is not worthy of Roxy and heads to the bar, amazed to learn of Hado's involvement in sending Roxy on a suicide mission of the Galia expedition. Later, Roxy reveals her assignment to Galia. Fate begs her not to go, but Roxy is adamant on avenging her father. Fate watches her leave, recalling rumors that the Hart family is a nuisance to the Vlerik Holy Knights. Vlerik siblings celebrate their impudent victory, leaving Hado to deal with the corpse. Fate decides to fight monsters that night to satisfy his hunger, and comes face to face with Hado. He faces off against Hado, showcasing his monstrous power as Hado's soldiers fail to land a single hit. Fate veers his attention to Hado's group, forcing them to run in horror. He takes off his mask, terrifying Hado, who recognizes him. He then mocks Hado to show his Holy Knight abilities. As Hado takes a stance to attack, Greed signifies confidence in shattering a holy sword. Hado tries to attack but is easily outmaneuvered by Fate. Fate decimates Hado's holy sword and humiliates him, revealing his newfound strength. He forces Hado to experience the grotesque suffering he once inflicted upon him in Deictes, to teach him a lesson, recalling Hado's past callousness. He brutally defeats Hado, driven by wrath at the danger Roxy faces due to Hado's actions. Hado, debilitated and weakened, pleads for mercy, and reveals. Roxy volunteered for the Galia expedition, willing to sacrifice herself to rescue the kingdom and its citizens. As the amputated Hado pleads for his life, promising to cancel Roxy's expedition. Fate, fueled by his need for vengeance, ignores Hado's pleas, thrusting his blade through Hado's chest. As Hado passes away, Fate discards the Holy Sword technique skill through his Gluttony skill. Fate feeds all his stats to greed, and it morphs into a powerful scythe with a curse that can cut through anything. Elsewhere, Roxy is ready for the Galia expedition, wearing the gem Fate gifted her. Fate watches helplessly as Roxy bids her goodbye, their emotions bottled within them. Later on, the headmaid, Haru, bestows Fate a letter of recommendation from Roxy, ensuring his safety if employed at a lord's mansion. Fate denies the offer, opting to form his own way as a warrior. That night, Fate announces his true intention to Greed. If he can't stop Roxy from going to Galia, he'll have to follow her. Fate then embarks on the journey to Galia, unbeknownst to him that a mysterious girl is observing him. Roxy gives a speech to the troops joining the expedition, mentioning a man named Mugan and a girl named Miria as her trusted advisors. Mugan volunteers to avenge Roxy's father. Meanwhile, Mugan's daughter, Rain, who's a profound researcher, examines goblin body parts and finds magic arrows of the Black Sword, a weapon of mortal sin. Curious, Rain contemplates the lethal possibilities of these weapons in close combat. Fate then arrives at Tetra, the hub for shipping to the royal capital. The carriage to Galia is set to leave the following day, and Fate decides to grab a bite while Greed sarcastically jokes about Roxy. Fate interrupts when a group of warriors harass a man named Set, who seems hopeless. Flashbacks show Fate's cruel upbringing in his hometown, bullied by other kids, including Set, and mistreated after his father's death. Set, the child of the village elder who exiled Fate, is requesting his help against monsters. Fate, inspired by his gluttony skill and the chance to face monsters, concedes to help. The village elder, displeased with Fate's return, aims to sacrifice him to buy time against approaching monsters. Set elaborates that monsters, similar to gargoyles, appeared a month ago, and witnesses saw them fly. Fate's loud stomach rumbles, attracting unwanted attention. Set's daughter gives Fate candy, unknowingly poisoning him. As Fate falls down, monsters attack the village. Set attempts to wake Fate with an antidote. The village is being attacked, and Greed warns Fate about the monster's skill level. They were in a dire situation, forcing Greed to morph into a scythe for the ensuing fight. Fate uses the scythe skill against the fire-breathing dragons, but encounters a new obstacle, an enormous level 47 leader with fire resistance. A vicious fight ensues, with Fate using his gluttony skill to obtain fire resistance after vanquishing the monster leader. The next day, after the victory, Set grieves the village's disaster, while Fate reveals the harsh truths about the ruined soil. Set, amazed by Fate's identify skill, questions his warrior path. In a weird turn of events, Set asks Fate to hit him to call things even between them, and Fate agrees for the sake of closure. Fate then bids farewell to the village and his father's memories. Meanwhile, Roxy reaches Lanchester, and Mugan secretly warns her of the Lord of Lanchester. Fate, after having earned 3 gold coins to guard a carriage, is stopped by bandits. Nevertheless, Mine of Wrath comes along, showcasing her deadly sin ability and seeking a carriage ride. Greed finds the situation intriguing, especially when Mine gobbles up Fate's jerky. They approach Lanchester, where Rudolph the Lord fakes saving a girl from a beast to gain clout. Fate discovers that Roxy was recently spotted in Lanchester a day before. He observes citizens with marks and different social classes, living a content life under Rudolph's rule. Soon after, Rudolph's cruel torture of citizens displays his need for superiority over the Hart family. Fate and Mine find a place to sleep, and Greed reveals the concept of skills of deadly sin. These include envy, lust, pride, sloth, greed, wrath, and gluttony, each a master of their own universe. Fate ponders over his unfortunate possession of gluttony, the soul-devouring skill. Greed points out that his emotional unbalance is unhealthy and commands him to control gluttony through sustained near-starvation. Soon after, they practice while eliminating Sandmen, where Fate learns to manage his hunger between souls. The training increases, and the hunger becomes unbearable. Back at the inn, Mine sees a poster about obliterating the Sand Golem for a reward. Fate, with better control over his powers, sniffs out a crowned beast nearby. The primary dish for hunting is the Sand Golem chasing humans. Fate comes to the rescue, revealing the monster to be level 60. Using his flaming bow, Fate engages the Sand Golem, countering its sandstorm attack. The Sand Golem's core escapes, prompting Fate to transform Greed into a large bow. Fate, with augmented stats, destroys the core and robs the sandstorm attack. The people who were just saved marvel at Fate's incredible power, but he introduces himself as Corpse. The group advises getting equipment, but Greed insists Fate's unique ability to steal skills and increase stats is sufficient, so he doesn't need extra equipment. Mine is livid when Fate tells her he defeated the Sand Golem without her. Rudolph then comes around and demands Fate to serve him, causing a bitter feud with Mine. She sends Rudolph packing with a single hit. Damn, is she strong! This causes Fate to worry about their situation flee, before things get worse. After going to a serene village, they meet the Elder, a holy knight named Aaron. The Elder Chief insists on throwing hands with Fate before permitting them to pass. Even after Fate lost, Aaron sensed a burning passion in them and decided to let them stay under one condition. Fate must learn from him. Doubt arose within him, but Fate accepted the opportunity. They started their training with hand-to-hand combat, highlighting control and composure. During training, Gluttony starts throwing a hissy fit, causing severe agony, but improving Fate's mobility. Towards the evening, Fate sensed a monster approaching, and Aaron screams at Mine's solo eating party. Later, Aaron unveils a painting of his family, and Greed points out how Aaron's son resembles Fate. The following day, Aaron commands Fate to train parrying attacks with a wooden stick, and Fate realizes he can better control his immense stats now. Later that night, Fate conveys his gratitude to Aaron, who tells him about the tragic history of the village castle, now overtaken by a Lich Lord. As a result, Aaron, Fate, and Mine decide to vanquish the Lich. After going inside, they encounter illusions of Aaron's deceased family, in particular his son who attacks Aaron. It's revealed that the souls killed by Gluttony are forever trapped, and battling them means destroying them. Aaron is obstinate on handling it himself and faces his family's spirits, unveiling how he had abandoned them in the past. Fate, who was outside, confronts the Lich and uses his training to fight it. The Lich, outstandingly strong, controls corpses and begs for salvation. Fate tries his best not to harm the souls, but Aaron arrives, cutting them up to immobilize them. Using a combined Grand Cross attack, Fate and Aaron eliminate the Lich, freeing Aaron's family's spirits. Aaron tells them how sorry he is and promises to honor their memory. The illusion reappears, and the Lich tries to gain an upper hand. However, Fate destroys it, absorbing its stats with Gluttony. Aaron, now overcoming his level limit, decides to join his family after finishing his task. They try to see who is better in dealing with the remaining monsters. And afterwards, Aaron rewards Mine for protecting the village, and she seems obsessed with the importance of money. So she's one of those, huh? Aaron then remembers Mine from 50 years ago, seeing as how she hasn't aged due to a millennium of training, making her a phantom. Meanwhile, Raphael gains the Philosopher's Stone and learns about Hado's death, making him eager to learn of Corpse's true identity. Roxy's party comes across Aaron, tells them that he is a retired hero. Aaron informs them of his battles with Lich and tells them he didn't defeat the Lich alone. He keeps Fate's identity secret upon being questioned and refuses to tell it to Roxy. Aaron offers to train Roxy. Meanwhile, Fate and Mine approach the ruins of Galia. They come across a Chimera in its larvae state. Mine asks for Fate's help to use Gluttony against the creature. Mine wakes it up, revealing a human named Luna inside with scarlet eyes similar to Fate's. Mine unveils that the girl inside the Chimera is its primary core, and she is in need of Fate to defeat her. Even though Fate showed some reluctance due to the eternal torment of consumed souls, Mine is certain the girl is just a monster. The Chimera attacks, and Mine shields its lava wave. They split up, and Mine cuts off the creature's arm. Fate observes her power increase due to the sloth skill. The Chimera regenerates and tries to transform and evolve, forcing Fate to enter a half-starvation state to fully control and unleash Gluttony. While enduring excruciating pain, Fate successfully controls Gluttony. Mine holds back the beast as Fate unleashes a sandstorm arrow. With Mine's sloth-enhanced attack, they vanquish the Chimera, or so they thought. Fate initiates another sandstorm skill to block its vision. The Chimera protects itself with a barrier, and Fate, led by Greed's guidance, identifies and breaks the barrier's weakest point. Fate then mistakenly looks into the Chimera's eyes, causing his eye to bleed profusely. Mine trampolines Fate into the sky to use a second-level secret technique. Fate discovers the Chimera's core, but is trapped in its barrier. In a last attempt, Fate uses Deadly Inferno, activating Gluttony, and the strike hits right at Chimera's core. Even so, Fate is shown a grotesque vision of Luna. After the Chimera is eliminated, Fate realizes the potential danger of his Gluttony skill, and asks Mine to unalive him if he loses control in the future. Mine assures him and proceeds to comfort him, and plans to start building a village. Greed reaches level 3, resetting Fate's stats, and Greed transforms into a magic shield. Later on, Fate reaches the fabled Babylon, and sees a strong defensive wall between Babylon and Galia. Greed reveals his history with a previous wielder, and delineates that weapons of mortal sin can't be destroyed completely. As Roxy's arrival is celebrated, Fate nervously wears his mask. However, a mysterious girl in the crowd predicts Roxy's death and disappears into thin air. Fate discovers that Babylon attracts various warriors from across the world, including former Holy Knights and those who bear hatred against the Holy Knights. He despises the city's ridiculous expenses, and Greed points at a scabbard that attracts his attention. They meet a strange shop owner who beguiles Fate to craft him a custom scabbard, but quotes an insane price. Since this was way out of his budget, Fate ran away. Fate then decides to hunt monsters to earn extra cash. Crossing the Galia border, he encounters a foul-smelling area filled with lifeless bodies and toxic gases all around. A stampede of orcs come rushing in, armed to the brim and ready to stir up trouble. Greed informs Fate to treat them as fierce humans, and the battle ensues. Greed transforms into a shield, and Fate reveals a powerful attack called the Shield Bash. In spite of numerous orcs charging at him, Fate's controlled Gluttony skill activates without overwhelming him, leaving him perplexed about how Aaron's training actually worked. Back at the guild, Fate astonishes everyone by cashing in numerous orc ears he gained all on his own. Accused of stealing them, Fate warns everyone before subduing a foolish challenger. Roxy then arrives. After hearing about the commotion and believing in Corpse's self-defense, decides not to punish him severely. Fate then goes off to purchase new attire, as recommended by Roxy. Resolves to upgrade Fate's torn clothes, Greed insists starting with a new high-quality scabbard. The shop owner, Jade, offers to make a custom scabbard for a discount, seeking Corpse to use his gear in battle as a form of free advertisement. Fate undoubtedly accepts, and Jade enhances his gear, charging him half the price. Famished, Fate and Greed head to a restaurant, drawn in by a Zelos crowd. The real attraction is Eris, a girl with a lust skill, who automatically recognizes Fate's real name and convinces him to sit. Eris then reveals herself as part of the second-generation warriors and a guardian of the kingdom. She voices her concern about the aggression building up due to the Holy Knight's actions and forecasts Roxy's eventual demise. Eris believes Roxy's demise will lead to a future pillar for the kingdom. Fate, however, strongly objects, vowing to protect Roxy no matter what. Roxy catches wind of a lost squadron in Galia and insists on heading over to undergo a rescue mission. Meanwhile, Jade tells Fate that they need a unique stone for his scabbard, a rare item only found in Galia. Fate, as usual, accompanied by Greedy Two Shoes, encounters giant orcs upon arrival. Using his special ability, Shield Bash, he decimates them without breaking a sweat. Elsewhere, Roxy's group were walking toward the Great Canyon and faced numerous challenges due to the useless compass. While taking a much-needed breather, Fate encounters a disturbing vision and then faced off against crowned beasts, exhibiting a peculiar behavior. Roxy's group comes across an angry salamander. Corpse, Fate's alias, shows up to try and rescue them, showcasing his might. Roxy thanks him, and Corpse notices a strange mark on the salamander. After they reach the Great Canyon, Roxy and Corpse head their separate ways. As Roxy goes forth to rescue the squadron, Fate enters a purified land and uncovers a Chimera prototype. An explosion forces Corpse to return to Roxy's group, facing vicious chimeras. Fate and Roxy join hands to fight the chimeras, showcasing their efficient teamwork. The last chimera causes the ground to collapse. As they fall, Fate assures Roxy's safety, and their unbreakable bond is formed right then and there. After waking up, Fate panics momentarily about Roxy being on his lap, but he quickly calms himself, finding his mask. Roxy discusses the failed rescue mission, and Fate attributes his knowledge about Chimera to a Galian survivor. Afterward, Roxy starts joking around about Fate and his uncanny resemblance to someone she knows. Fate, feigning ignorance, narrowly avoids revealing his identity. The two start talking about Roxy's concerns for someone special to her, and Fate applauds the unknown man. Suddenly, Fate experiences extreme agony and notices the Chimera's scent. He flees from the scene and faces the Chimera alone, who bursts through the cave wall. During this battle, Fate foresees Roxy as the Chimera's core, but resolves to protect her no matter the cost. After defeating the Chimera, Greed notices the familiar mark on its body. Roxy and Fate then meet up, discovering the special stone nearby, which was a crystal formed from monsters. They headed back towards Roxy's group and lament the loss of her trustworthy companions. Meanwhile, a blonde version of Corpse with a glistening green eye is shown from afar. Later on, Roxy decides to test Corpse's skill in a fair duel due to his criminal background. She offers him a position in the royal army instead of facing incarceration if he refuses. Corpse refuses both, opting to duel Roxy instead. In their battle, Fate understands that Roxy won't hold back. Despite having superior stats, he still struggles against her skilled technique. Roxy tries to attack his mask, threatening to expose his identity. Fate perplexes everyone by revealing a specially made scabbard that enhances his holy sword techniques. Roxy asks him if he was a former holy knight, but Fate insists that he's just a casual fighter. However, Fate gets distracted by the gemstone necklace Roxy was wearing and remembers giving her the stone a while back. This distraction allows her to knock away his sword. Greed is furious since Fate lost his focus, and Roxy questions careless behavior. Fate denies any change and throws aside Roxy's suspicion about learning his fighting style from Sir Aaron. He recalls Mind's advice about aiming for the domain of E to defeat the mystical dragon, and the risks associated with pushing his limits. A warning signals a stampede of Death March, and Roxy gathers the royal army to intercept it. Fate witnesses the Death March and learns about a colossal slime monster approaching to target the Roxy. He prepares to assist, entering a half-starvation state, showcasing improved control. Using Greed as a bow, Fate launches a modified long-range attack at the approaching creature, revealing a massive slime with a familiar control mark. The slime poses a significant threat, and Fate decides to investigate the mastermind behind the controlled monsters. As he engages the slime, Greed warns about its formidable stats, but Fate manages to split it in half temporarily. However, the slime regenerates and heads for the royal army. Fate chases it, dealing with its offspring and realizing the slime's advanced techniques. In a daring move, Fate decides to use an unpracticed attack, giving Greed a significant share of his stats as an offering. However, the attack is partially thwarted, and the slime persists. Unexpectedly, Fate senses someone watching and attacks, assuming it's Eris. Greed identifies the observer with the Envy Gun sword, revealing that a magic bullet enhanced the slime's power and allowed it to replicate infinitely. Consumed by the slime, Fate manages to overcome its corrosion magic and confronts the mysterious observer. Greed warns him not to overdo it, explaining the risk of driving his skill into overdrive. Fate launches an arrow, but it's deflected, revealing the observer's domain of E power. Despite facing a stronger opponent, Fate refuses to give up. Determined to achieve victory at any cost, he demands his Gluttony skill to give him the power he needs. Both of Fate's eyes turn red, signaling his entry into the domain of E, leaving the mysterious observer shocked. Fate skillfully dodges the observer's attacks, creating a smokescreen and eventually destroying his mask, revealing his true identity as Northern, the previous leader of Galia and Roxy's ally. Northern plays a flute, announcing the imminent arrival of the mystical dragon, claiming they both will give everything to kill Roxy. He challenges Fate to stop them, firing shots while the slime corners. Recognizing Northern's strategy to buy time, Fate rushes past, attempting to save Roxy. The mystical dragon approaches Roxy, launching a powerful attack. Roxy stands her ground, but Fate arrives in the nick of time to rescue her. Fate confronts the dragon again, refusing to let it harm Roxy. His mask is destroyed, revealing his identity to Roxy. Apologizing for the deception, Fate thanks her before running off to face the dragon. Greed reveals their plan, and Fate uses the ability Grand Cross to immobilize the dragon. Northern mocks Fate, initiating a clash between them. He identifies Fate's weaknesses, exploiting his exhaustion because of his dual focus on maintaining the grip over the dragon and fighting Northern at the same time. As the fight progresses, Fate loses ground and senses his stats dropping. Northern gains the upper hand, cutting off Fate's arm. Northern reveals Eris's high expectations for Fate and plans to make him pay for all the troubles. However, Fate surprises Northern by using illusion magic, shutting off Northern's lights. Fate sees a vision and finds himself in a strange place, meeting Luna, who warns him about consuming the mystical dragon. After defeating Northern, Fate falls, but is saved by greed. Luna explains her inability to support him further, revealing the consequences of devouring the mystical dragon. The mystical dragon breaks free, and Fate decides to end the fight quickly. Greed points out the challenge of using a bow with one arm, prompting Fate to launch Greed at the dragon. Combining a powerful punch, Fate deals massive damage to the dragon, identifying its high-level stats. He uses his advantage to defeat the dragon, but consuming its soul triggers intense pain. Fighting Gluttony's control, Fate knows he must act to prevent becoming a greater threat than the mystical dragon. Despite Greed's attempt to stop him, Fate accesses Greed's new level, resetting his stats and collapsing. Fate, having lost his arm, urges Mind to kill him as he collapses. Roxy intervenes, expressing her enduring care for him despite the revelations. Roxy insists they return to Babylon together, accepting Fate despite the truth about him. Mind departs, leaving Fate in Roxy's care, and he collapses into her arms. A week later, Fate awakens in a room only to find Eris informing him of his week-long slumber and the retrieval of Greed. She reveals they need Fate's help in the new era post-mystical dragon. Fate agrees, demanding Roxy's safety as a condition. Eris discloses a warrior with the powers of envy, who had control over Northern and his change in plans after the mystical dragon's defeat. Eris suggests they must leave before Roxy returns, due to the danger posed by Fate's gluttony. Roxy makes it to the room, discovering Fate's absence, reads a letter apologizing for the lies and promising a return. In a childhood flashback, Roxy encounters young Fate, comforting him and fostering his positive view of the world. Roxy hopes to meet him again and vows to get stronger. Meanwhile, the Vleriks discuss Corpse's true identity as Fate. In the desert, Fate sacrifices 40% of his stats to activate Greed's Twilight Healing, regenerating his lost arm. They return to the capital. Later, Fate, frustrated by Greed's continued greediness, agrees to earn money for a new scabbard suitable for his domain of V. Fate, now embracing his glutton persona, prepares for future challenges. That's all for this episode. Thank you for watching, and be sure to leave a like and subscribe to stay updated on future contents.